All right, let's consider two types of honor that are available, particularly to those who profess faith in Jesus Christ. So, the first type of honor is that kind of honor that comes as a result of your growing loyalty to God. Okay, so it's a benefit that you receive as a believer who is focused and faithfully submitted to the great I am. And because your heart is set on honoring and pleasing God more and more in all that you do, it actually moves God. And God is so moved by your devotion that He wants to and does pour out greater measures of His glory and more of His honor on you and in you. And He fills you with His radiance and His brilliance and His light, to the point that even your environment and the people within your environment respond to this life that shines from you. And the life that shines from you impacts the people in your environment in ways that the people may or may not understand. Certainly, the angelic beings around you, because there are angelic beings around you, they understand, but the people may be trying to figure out just what it is about you that makes you so distinctive and attractive and beautiful. And so there's an awareness that somehow your existence on this planet is a benefit. And the reality of that just it radiates from you the more you engage God and the more you engage man. So that's the glory of God on you. That is the glory of God on you. And that glory is a gift, an active, ever increasing gift to those who are God's dedicated, to those who stay focused and committed to seeking, loving, and pleasing the Father. Okay, so God says, them that honor me, I will honor. He says that. He says that in 1 Samuel chapter 2. For them who honor me, I will honor. And you know what? God takes great pleasure in that. He takes great pleasure in bestowing His honor on people. He particularly loves to give rich gifts of great honor, great glory, great power, and other good and pleasurable and satisfying things to those who are dedicated to Him. So, yes, God honors those who honor Him. Not only is that reality, it is the very model of attaining glory that Jesus demonstrated and that He continues to live out because He is alive. He's alive, y'all. Jesus focused on pleasing the Father above all else, even at the expense of His own comforts and personal desires. Jesus' decisions and behaviors proved His focus. And of course, when I say His decisions and behaviors, I am not saying His decisions and behaviors at church or His decisions and behaviors in front of other people or His decisions and behaviors in front of the people outside of His household, because some have the mindset that it's only their behavior at church that matters. It's their behavior at church that proves their loyalty and focus on the Lord. And then when church is over, then they're free to revert to some other person, some other personality that God does not like and God does not honor. Or, a lot of us can be under this impression that, act your best, behave your best in front of people outside of the house. But when you get home, then you can let your hair down, kick your feet up, and the people at home know you. And if you have to lash out sometimes, then you lash out sometimes. If you have to make jokes that you shouldn't, if you feel like making jokes that you shouldn't make, home is the place to do it, but just don't do it outside home. No, it doesn't work that way. But some people are, a step better. They'll be consistent in their behavior in front of everybody. And then it's only when they get by themselves that they start doing bad things. But all of that is eating away at your faith, and we should be striving, any of us who may think in that way, we should be striving to go beyond that. We should be striving to emulate the thought patterns, the decision making, the behavior that Jesus emulates. All of his decisions and behaviors, whether it was in public or in private, whether he was by himself or with someone else, all of his decisions were aimed at all of his decisions proved his focus and his commitment to pleasing the Father over his own comforts and desires. And what better way to prove that he was committed to the Father's desires over his own than for him to have left a place of great honor, of great comfort, of great beauty, a place where he was receiving all the esteem. He left heaven, right? So he already had all that stuff, but he left it and came to live as a man on a broken and cursed earth with all of his broken and cursed people who would eventually misunderstand him, reject him, assault him, kill him. You know, I think it's interesting because of the people who rejected Jesus. Because of the people who rejected Jesus, they didn't reject him because they simply didn't like him or because they didn't necessarily agree with him, even though that may have played a part in it. But it wasn't the major reason they rejected him. It was because, now that I think about it, it wasn't because they couldn't see any glory on him, right? Because the people saw the glory on Jesus. They could perceive that there was authority on him, right? And I do believe they thought he was a nice guy. I really do. So why did they reject Jesus? Well, it was because Jesus refused to receive vain honor from men. He refused to receive vain honor from men. How many of us can raise our hands and honestly say that we have that same practice, that we refuse to receive the vain honor from men, right? So these people who were approaching Jesus, who were engaging Jesus, these people were in darkness, and to varying degrees, they loved their darkness. They didn't want to change, a lot of them. And there's just something about accepting the honor from people who love evil and don't want to change that just affirms them in their ways and encourages them to continue in their not so good, very bad ways. And so we read about people having a mindset to force Jesus to be king. There was a scenario where a group of people it was on their minds that they were going to force him to be king. And his response to them was, to get away. He just evaded the people. He got away from the people, got away to himself. Eventually they tracked him down, they found him. And then he responded to them. He said, listen, you guys are only interested because of the bread and the meat that I provided you. Yeah, because these were the people that he fed with the 2 fish and the 5 loaves of bread. You guys are only interested. You're only here because you received that food, but you don't want the real bread and the real meat that I have to offer. Don't y'all know I am the bread of heaven? I'm the bread of heaven. Drink my blood, eat my flesh. He said some things like that. And so he wasn't going along with their plans for him. When people wanted to pay compliments to Jesus, hoping to get some kind of affirmation or perhaps some insight from him, the young rich ruler called him good master. And Jesus says, why do you call me good master? He wouldn't even receive that small compliment. Why do you call me good? Isn't there only one who's good? He was testing the integrity of the man's words and of the man's heart. One person came to Jesus in the middle of the night. Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from God. And Jesus responds, listen, unless you be born again, you won't see the kingdom of God. or when the religious times where the religious leaders invited Jesus over for dinner, because they could perceive that there was some kind of prestige to be gained somehow by being associated with this unlearned carpenter, spiritual teacher guy. They could see the glory on him. And Jesus, while he's there, he doesn't say to himself, well, I'll just be nice, I'll be good, or I'll just hold back on the truth since, we are at their house, they're feeding me. No, Jesus is letting them know at the dinner table, hey, you have darkness in your heart and it separates you from God. I mean, thank you for the dinner. The food is good, but you're not, so Jesus wasn't changing for a few compliments and gifts and accolades. Jesus rejected that type of attention because he knew the hearts and motives of those trying to give him the honor were dirty and corrupt. And he wasn't interested in affirming them in that. And neither was he interested in being affirmed by that. He knew that was the very thing that keeps a man bound by sin and death. That false sense of goodness, that affirmation that can so easily convince a person that their sin probably isn't so offensive to God. Hey, they like me. Everybody says good things about me. That influential guy thinks I'm all right. God must think I'm all right. But that's not necessarily so, because God's thoughts are not man's thoughts. Or even when a person is on the right track, it's something about accepting the honor, the compliments of people, especially people who don't want to change into what God is, who don't want to change into the image of God. When a person is on the right track and they receive compliments from them, that can really pull on that person's soul, and it can pressure the person to divert off course, if only ever so slightly, in order to get a few more compliments, just a few more compliments, and with that desire to maintain men's approval. So Jesus refused to alter his course, shift his focus, change his message in order to receive the applause, in order to receive the pats on the back and the flattery and the Mr. Popularity, prom king status, Nobel Peace Prize type of ego stroking that comes from a fake and unfaithful people who offer fake and unfaithful benefits. And what do I mean by fake and unfaithful benefits? Well, they benefits that don't last, they don't sustain, they don't fulfill. How can you believe, Jesus said, and receive honor one from another, and seek not the honor that comes from God only? How can you believe and seek honor from one another and seek not the honor that comes from God only? Jesus said it very plainly in John 5, verse 41. I receive not honor from men. He just made it very plain. I don't do that stuff. And the few people he did receive it from, it was because they were humble. There was a sense of humility, an acknowledgement of their need for change, an acknowledgement of their messed up state, and realizing that Jesus was their only hope. Now them I will receive, but if you're just trying to win me over with some compliments and a few gifts here and there, just so that you can feel affirmed in your sin, well, no, sir. No, ma'am. I'm not playing that game with you. And so, the way Jesus was and is, that's what happens when you have an awareness of your identity in God, when you have an awareness and an understanding, growing understanding of your purpose in God, and you have a clear understanding of who is controlling things. That would be God. You can stand when you understand those things, your identity, your purpose, who's in control, then you can stand firmly and be sober-minded and stable in your emotions and decision making, because you know that God is working everything out for your good, his good. Everybody wins when we obey God. And you know that he can't lose. He's the victor. He's victorious. All I have to do is obey. That's my job. So yes, Jesus understood that very well, and he understood that he had a greater, more excellent ministry to obtain and to administer than, he had an unmovable kingdom to build and represent. He understood the gravity of it. He understood why he was there. He was focused on the mission. He had a standard of holiness to establish and to exemplify. Are we not charged as believers with the same mission? Jesus understood that he needed to bring heaven to earth. He had the reality and the life of God to reveal and make available to a dying people who absolutely needed a sovereign God who would mercifully extend his grace and mercy and truth to them if they were to ever live. Jesus understood his sense of purpose. He understood the heart and mind and ways of the Father, that they were good. And so he completely committed to these purposes. He was completely committed to the will and the way of the Father. He was driven by a love for the Father, driven by his Father's love for him, and driven by love for creation. Jesus understood that the Father's way yield the best outcome. And he, simply put, he believed his Father. He trusted his Father above his own desires and preferences. He trusted the Father above man's desires and preferences. And so he yielded to the Father above all of man's desires and preferences, including his own. And the Father has highly exalted and highly exalts Jesus because of his obedience and faith, making the name of Jesus and the person of Jesus greater than that of all other names and above all created beings in heaven and in earth and under earth, so much so that there's no other name given to men by which we can be saved. And the Father loves honoring Jesus in that way. The Father absolutely loves the demonstration of perfection and goodness through Jesus. It displays his goodness, his ingenuity, his greatness. It brings the Father glory to honor the Son. Many of you who are parents can understand how good it makes you feel, how good it makes you look when your child looks good, when your child does well. It brings you honor when they do well. Well, the Father takes pleasure in giving glory and honor to his Son. It gives him glory. And so it takes the faith of Jesus and a willingness to be as Jesus in order to enter into the glory that Jesus is making available to you and to me. The entire Bible is full of accounts of men and women who have entered into that glory, who were faithful and obedient to the Lord until the end, walking in the way of Jesus, some even unto death, and God has exalted them greatly. Even now, until this day, we study and draw from the examples of these men and women because of the eternal reputations established by God and left on record of these men and women of faith and power. And we know that there is even a greater measure of God's glory and honor that they now embrace in heaven. And there's even greater glory to come that they'll experience after Jesus returns. So yeah, there's lots of glory and honor and promotion in the Spirit, and that the Lord is giving and will give his faithful. Jesus himself being our greatest testament of this. And God wants to establish you and I in these ways. He wants to build our eternal reputations in heaven, before heaven and before earth. Yeah, so that's the honor that comes from God, that he clothes and fills you with and appoints you to as you become more loyal to him. It's the greatest honor one can ever get, because it comes from the greatest authority. And with that being said, it also communicates the great displeasure that it can create, the great insult it is when we turn it down or when we downplay it. We need to acknowledge what the Lord is offering us. We need to acknowledge it within our hearts, and acknowledge it before men, acknowledge it before heaven and earth. What the Lord has invited us to when He brought us into this world. He is this entire life is a process. If we submit to His process, we'll find that it's a process of attaining greater and greater glory until we enter into the greatest glory. God is offering us so much. He's offering us so much. I was intending to talk about the other honor, the second type of honor that I mentioned earlier, but I think I'm going to go ahead and save that for the next video. So God bless you as we focus on following Jesus' example of obtaining glory. Obviously, to focus on Jesus' example and to emulate Jesus' example of obtaining glory is to not focus so much on our glory, but to focus on the glory of the Father.